"You're under arrest, Grandpa." He stayed completely silent when they locked the handcuffs on him. He simply looked forward, peaceful, quiet, as if nothing caught him off guard. Inside the courtroom, people murmured quietly. A few chuckled. One jury member rolled her eyes. To everyone there, he appeared like just another angry elderly man stuck in the wrong situation. But what nobody realized, what even the judge failed to grasp, was that this handcuffed man had once stopped a war with one bullet. And the single witness who understood the truth wore 4 stars on his uniform and was already heading to the courthouse. Welcome to the Veteran's Voice. Before we move forward with this powerful story, share in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve attention, press that subscribe button to support our channel. We're expanding daily, and I truly appreciate you being part of this journey. The courthouse stood smaller than most would imagine. A 2-level brick structure squeezed between an old library and a dental clinic in a peaceful southern community where folks still greeted strangers and believed uniforms represented authority. That morning, the parking area was already halfway filled before sunrise touched the rooftop. Inside, news reporters positioned themselves quietly in the rear seats, detecting a story that hadn't shown its full significance yet. The case remained local, technically insignificant, an argument that became physical at a fuel station. No guns, no injuries, simply a confrontation between a retired Marine and a younger individual who insisted the veteran had threatened him with military force. It should have been a standard minor charge. It should have been thrown out. But something about the man's quietness made people uneasy. He didn't justify himself when asked. He didn't clarify. He simply appeared at every session on schedule, alone in identical plain clothing and worn jeans with an expression in his gaze that made the courtroom officers nervous without understanding why. Some claimed he was mentally unstable. Others claimed he was difficult. One news piece called him a bitter former military man with anger issues. Nobody discussed his service history. Nobody had bothered asking. In reality, most assumed he was simply another veteran who never adapted to regular life. That's how townspeople described him when they mentioned him at all. He lived by himself at the border of a forested property in a mobile home with no connection and no mailbox. The locals saw him walking at sunrise with his posture upright and his pace steady, always in identical boots, always silent. Some found him odd, others found him damaged, but nobody found him important. In court, his name appeared on a document attached to the prosecutor's folder. Daniel Rigg, age 66, former United States Marine. That's everything anyone understood. That's everything they thought they needed, or so they assumed. The public lawyer appointed to him barely raised her eyes from her paperwork. She'd attempted speaking with him earlier, but he hadn't shared much. No relatives mentioned, no witnesses, no defense, no fury either. Just that identical faraway calmness that made even the judge pause before saying his name. The officer brought him in slowly, restraints already secured tight. Though he showed no sign of fighting back, he stared forward, vision locked on nothing specific. He wasn't broken, he simply seemed finished. In the bench behind the defense area, several people observed him like he was something unusual. One person whispered, "Isn't that the individual who shouted at some young person about a parking spot?" Another replied, "No, I believe he threatened to harm someone. Shell shock, most likely." The judge entered. The room rose. The proceedings started. It progressed rapidly. Witnesses provided unclear statements. A shop employee remembered hostile body movements. A lady claimed she'd overheard him mumble something about understanding how to eliminate targets. The accuser, a man in his 30s wearing a neck support he didn't require, informed the jury he felt terrified when the elderly man stared at him. When questioned what was spoken, he paused, then stated he claimed he could eliminate me from 800 yards without hesitation. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The defense raised no objection. Daniel Rigg remained still, showing no expression, completely unbothered. The prosecutor delivered his final argument with rehearsed assurance. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this individual may have served our country once, but that was many years back. What we see today is someone who exists in the memory of a uniform he no longer puts on. Someone who believes his history gives him permission to intimidate. That's not bravery, that's threatening." He allowed the statement to settle. Some jury members agreed with nods. Others kept their vision lowered. The public lawyer stayed quiet. The judge provided directions. Discussion was anticipated to be quick. Officers guided Rigg back toward the detention area. Cameras snapped. Murmurs continued. And nobody, not one person in that courtroom, saw the dark SUV that had just pulled up outside the courthouse entrance. The individual inside wore a clean uniform. His collar displayed 4 silver stars, and his attention was directed not at the reporters, not at the cameras, but at the name written on the case file: Daniel Rigg. The discussion room entrance shut with an empty sound that bounced through the now quiet courtroom. The jury had been absent for under 3 minutes when someone in the audience turned toward a reporter and said quietly, "They won't need long." The judge moved away from her position but didn't exit the space, deciding instead to examine documents at her table, as if even she felt the decision was guaranteed. In the distant corner, Daniel Rigg sat by himself, palms resting on the surface before him, fingers still, vision calm. His restraints had been temporarily removed, but the thick chain still connected to his waist. He appeared like he had zero plan of protecting himself if things turned bad, like he'd come to terms that people only notice what they choose to notice. Beyond the courtroom, the corridor started to crowd. Someone had shared a picture of the proceedings on the internet, and now local television anchors were preparing just beyond the entrance doors. In the parking space, several veterans who had worked alongside Rigg, individuals who hadn't encountered him in years, were gradually showing up, news having traveled through quiet messages and unspoken networks. They hadn't arrived to give evidence. They hadn't even received invitations. They appeared because something about this felt incorrect. And then arrived the SUV. It stopped without emergency lights, without commotion. The individual who emerged wasn't security, wasn't a government official. He was a general, General Samuel Wyatt, former commander of Special Operations Command. Most regular people wouldn't have known the face, but the instant he entered through the entrances, the staff member at the front counter stood somewhat taller. The security guard at the scanner didn't request identification. The general simply acknowledged once and questioned, "Where's courtroom 3? His tone was gentle but commanding. He wasn't here to observe, he was here with intention. Inside, nobody yet realized he was in the structure. The jury hadn't come back. The judge tapped her writing instrument softly against her bench. The public lawyer typed randomly on a computer, acting busy. The prosecutor examined his device and grinned. And Rigg stayed precisely as he had the whole duration, steady, calm, unmoved. Not challenging, not arrogant, just prepared. In the corridor, General Wyatt passed reporters without acknowledging them. One shouted to question if he was connected to the media group. He didn't respond. Another identified the stars on his uniform and started filming. The general stopped briefly beyond the courtroom entrance. His expression, though controlled, held something significant. Not shame, not rage, something closer to respect combined with urgency. He paused a moment, then pushed the entrance and walked inside. The judge glanced up, puzzled at first, then quickly stood from her position as soon as she noticed the rank insignia. The courtroom became motionless. The jury remained absent, but the space itself had transformed. Reporters aimed their cameras. The prosecutor gradually rose, staring as if uncertain whether this was real. Wyatt moved forward, not to the judge's bench, not to the prosecution, but straight toward the defense area, toward Daniel Rigg. And Daniel finally raised his face. Their vision connected. No statements were spoken, not immediately, but something had already changed in the atmosphere. The quietness wasn't strange. It was respectful. For a brief time, nobody breathed. The general remained motionless, arms locked behind his frame, facing Daniel Rigg like someone about to present something heavier than commands. The judge, still upright, spoke softly. "General, can I inquire what brings you here today?" Wyatt didn't respond right away. He observed Rigg, then addressed the courtroom, his tone steady, distinct, and firm. "I'm here because this individual before you is the explanation I'm breathing. He doesn't realize I appeared today. He didn't request me to. In reality, he likely wished I wouldn't. But I learned about this proceeding and I couldn't remain quiet." The prosecutor moved awkwardly. Reporters pushed forward. One jury member coming back from the hallway stopped in the entrance, sensing she just entered something far larger than the case document she'd been provided. Wyatt moved nearer to the bench, not to dominate, but to be understood. 31 years back, I was trapped behind a falling wall outside Fallujah. My group was separated. Radio contact was lost. I had 2 injured and no method to escape. We were surrounded. And then from nowhere, a lone marksman opened a route. He didn't communicate. He didn't pause for gratitude. He simply fired. 12 confirmed eliminations in less than 5 minutes. Every round positioned with perfect accuracy. The final one through a rooftop opening at 936 yards, moving person side wind. That round rescued my existence and the existence of the soldiers with me. He stopped, examining the space. That marksman was Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Rigg. Whispers erupted throughout the courtroom, but Wyatt raised a palm and the space quieted again. "I've examined the statements. I've observed the accusations, and I'm informing you now, whatever statements this individual supposedly made in a parking area, he's deserved the opportunity to be understood in a manner none of you can calculate. He doesn't communicate much. He never did. He didn't return from battle seeking parades or applause. But if you assume for one moment that the individual here is a danger to anybody, you have zero understanding what control looks like. He addressed the judge. With your allowance, I'd like to address the jury. The judge, astonished, agreed slowly. Continue, General. Wyatt approached the front of the jury seating and inhaled deeply. There's an explanation Daniel Rigg didn't justify himself. It's not because he's at fault, it's because he's exhausted. Exhausted of being misjudged. Exhausted of watching the society mistake quietness with danger. But I understand him. I understand that when disorder erupts, when gunfire starts, when nobody knows the solution, you hope someone like him is present. He moved backward, then added quietly, "You don't place individuals like this in restraints. You place them in record books." And then before the courtroom, the reporters, the judge, the jury, and the individual who once rescued his existence, General Wyatt did something nobody anticipated. He lowered to one knee. Not from fragility, not for performance, but as an apology, not for himself, but for a structure that had overlooked who Daniel Rigg was. Nobody in the courtroom shifted. Not the officer, not the prosecutor, not even the judge, who remained frozen behind her bench, one palm still resting on her hammer, the other shielding her lips. The jury, already coming back to their positions from discussion, now watched the four-star general kneeling before the individual they were about to find guilty. One jury member wiped away tears. Another looked down, feeling regret. The prosecutor parted his lips as if to challenge, but the statements never emerged. Daniel Rigg didn't respond immediately. He didn't search around for approval or show any indication of surprise. His attention stayed locked on the individual kneeling before him, vision heavy with a lifetime of thoughts he'd never expressed. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he stood from his position, approached the general, and offered his palm. Wyatt rose, accepted it, and in that instant the two individuals stood facing each other. Not as commander and shooter, not as witness and accused, but as something older, stronger, as warriors connected by something the remainder of the space could never completely grasp. The judge spoke, tone cracking just barely. In consideration of this statement and the remarkable context presented before this court, I am removing all accusations effective now. Her hammer descended, not with strength, but with conclusion. Daniel's chains were taken off. This occasion, nobody handled him without deep respect. He didn't hurry to exit. He turned, acknowledged once to the jury, and proceeded down the pathway slowly, each footstep echoing in the wooden chamber like the closing mark of a statement long delayed. Outside, several veterans positioned themselves at attention as he went by. One saluted without being prompted. Reporters attempted to speak, but none could create a question that didn't sound ridiculous. Rigg continued walking. He didn't utter a statement. He never had to. General Wyatt walked behind him, not as protection, but as a witness. And as they moved into the daylight, for the first occasion in years, Daniel Rigg appeared less like a shadow and more like an individual returning from a battle that had never finished. Sometimes a hero doesn't put on a uniform anymore. He doesn't march, doesn't salute, doesn't participate in formalities. Sometimes he enters a courtroom wearing a silent stare and damaged boots, not requesting acknowledgement, just wishing the society will quit misreading the quietness he's held for decades. Daniel Rigg never requested to be protected. He didn't share his account. He didn't have to, because there are individuals like him who think that doing what's correct shouldn't demand praise, who hold their wounds privately, their recollections quietly, and their dignity with a burden most people will never identify until the instant it's too delayed. But not this occasion, because this occasion someone raised their voice. This occasion someone recalled. This occasion, an individual with 4 stars on his uniform knelt in a courtroom, not to beg, but to fix something we far too frequently get incorrect, overlooking what giving up looks like once the battle is finished. Overlooking that those who protected lives abroad are still attempting to exist here. Overlooking that quietness doesn't indicate fragility. It frequently indicates power too profound to express. Daniel Rigg didn't exit that courtroom cleared. He exited unaltered because he never required the judgment to inform him who he was. But for once, the society paused long enough to witness it. And perhaps that's the understanding we bring forward. Not to delay for awards or celebrations, but to identify excellence while it's still moving quietly around us. This account was presented to you by the veteran's voice. Before we finish today, here's our question. Have you ever encountered someone who never requested acknowledgement but earned more than everybody else? Share in the comments what they represented to you and how you recall them. And if you believe accounts like this deserve to be shared, press that subscribe button to support our channel. We'll meet you in the next one.